History flows like a river. Tell us what happened today in history.
Claiming that its athletes will not be safe from protests and possible physical attacks, the Soviet Union announces that it will not compete in the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. Despite the Soviet statement, it was obvious that the boycott was a response to the decision of the United States to boycott the 1980 Games that were held in Moscow. Just months before the 1984 Olympic Games were to begin in Los Angeles, the Soviet government issued a statement claiming, "It is known from the very first days of preparations for the present Olympics the American administration has sought to set course at using the Games for its political aims." Chauvinistic sentiments and anti-Soviet hysteria are being whipped up in this country. Russian officials went on to claim that protests against the Soviet athletes were likely to break out in Los Angeles and that they doubted whether American officials would try to contain such outbursts. The administration of President Ronald Reagan responded to these charges by declaring that the Soviet boycott was a blatant political decision for which there was no real justification. In the days following the Soviet announcement, 13 other communist nations issued similar statements and refused to attend the Games. The Soviets, who had been stung by the U.S. refusal to attend the 1980 Games in Moscow because of the Russian intervention in Afghanistan in 1979, were turning the tables by boycotting the 1984 Games in America. The diplomatic impact of the action was quite small. The impact on the Games themselves, however, was immense. Without competition from the Soviet Union, East Germany, and other communist nations, the United States swept to an Olympic record of 83 gold medals. At 9:17 a.m. Beijing time on May 8, 2008, Beijing Olympic flame was lit on Mount Komolangma, the world's highest peak at 8,844.43 altitude. The magnificent view of the sacred flame Yao Everest finally appears in front of the world. On July 13, 2001, in the final statement of the Beijing Olympic Bidding Committee in Moscow, Yang Lan, on behalf of the Beijing Olympic Bidding Committee, promised the eternal flame of the Olympic Games will span the world's highest peak, Mount Komolangma, thus reaching an unprecedented height. Today, China has fulfilled its promise 7 years ago. The flame from Olympia has reached the highest peak in the world, and China has written a miracle in the history of the Olympic Games. Starting at 3 a.m., by 5:30, all the players had reached the second step. At 9 o'clock, all the climbers were ready on the road 30 meters from the top of Mount Everest. At 9:10 a.m., Rob Zan took out the lamp and the flame from Olympia burned on Mount Everest for the first time. Luobuandui then ignited the first torchbearer's auspicious cloud torch with a spark stick, and the auspicious cloud and the torch achieved perfect integration in Everest. After the relay of 3 torchbearers, Wang Yangfeng, Nima Churan and Huang Chungi, the Olympic torch jumped in the peak of Everest at Kairanwang, standing at the top of the peak of Everest. U.S. President Trump officially announced at 2 p.m. local time on May 8, 2018 that the United States would withdraw from the Iranian nuclear agreement and impose the highest-level sanctions on Iran. Earlier, Iran, as the #1 enemy of the United States in the Middle East, was severely threatened by the development of nuclear weapons, which seriously threatened the security of the United States and its Middle East allies, especially Israel, and was subjected to severe economic sanctions by the Western society led by the United States. Especially in the era of former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in power, Iran is pushing ahead with its nuclear program in high profile despite Western sanctions. But after relatively moderate Rouhani became president of Iran in 2013, Iran, which has been increasingly distressed by Western sanctions, has expressed a clear willingness to negotiate a suspension of its nuclear weapons program. Ultimately, Iran signed an agreement on July 14, 2015, called the Joint Comprehensive Action Plan, with the joint efforts of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations and Germany. Iran is willing to destroy its nuclear weapons research capabilities in accordance with the rules and requirements of the agreement and restrict its nuclear projects strictly to the purely civilian scope that can only be used to develop nuclear power plants. The United States and the West also agreed to lift major sanctions against Iran. The agreement was also applauded around the world at that time, including the leaders of the United States and European countries. President Barack Obama said the agreement would make the United States and the world safer. However, Israel, Iran's #1 enemy in the Middle East, strongly opposes the agreement, which believes that all Iranian nuclear capabilities should be abolished, and now the agreement will only allow Iranians to continue to secretly study nuclear weapons. Others in the United States responded to Israel's dissatisfaction by saying that the agreement appeased Iran as a traitorous agreement, such as the current President of the United States, Trump. So, as long as Trump was running for the presidency of the United States, he had been advocating that the United States would withdraw from this catastrophic Iranian nuclear agreement and continue sanctions against Iran after his election. After being elected president, Trump immediately began to press ahead with the plan and promised to announce the latest U.S. decision on the Iranian nuclear agreement by May 12. However, except for the United States, all the countries involved in the negotiations on Iran's nuclear agreement 3 years ago strongly opposed the withdrawal of the United States from this important agreement, which they thought had effectively curbed Iran's development of nuclear weapons. And the opposition of Britain, France and Germany, the 3 biggest allies of the United States in Europe, is most evident. In the past month, the leaders of France, Britain and Germany have contacted Trump successively, and even visited him to ask him not to withdraw from Iran's nuclear agreement. After all, if the United States betrays its faith in such a major international agreement, will there never be peace in the Middle East once Iran follows the example of restarting nuclear weapons research or even making a more dangerous response? So, in order to get Trump back on his mind, the leaders of France and Germany, the 2 European Union powers, expressed their willingness during their visits to the United States to allow Trump to supplement the agreement as long as he did not withdraw from it. In their view, a nuclear weapon-free Iran is better managed than a nuclear weapon Iran. At the same time, the IAEA and the United Nations also strongly oppose Trump's attempt to withdraw the United States from Iran's nuclear agreement, because Iran has indeed been fulfilling its commitments under the agreement since it was signed in 2015, has not conducted any further nuclear weapons research and has destroyed its own nuclear weapons research facilities. Several IAEA investigations over the past 3 years have also confirmed that Iranians are trustworthy. Another interesting story is that Netanyahu, Iran's top enemy, Israel's leader, recently publicly displayed a so-called Iranian nuclear weapon confidential document discovered by the country's intelligence agencies, accusing Iran of deceiving the world. However, the IAEA said that they had seen the document 13 years ago and questioned why Israel accused Iran of cheating with an old document more than 10 years ago. As a result, Netanyahu was insulting himself and was exposed repeatedly by Western media, who likewise disliked his practice. But no matter how committed the Iranians are to nuclear weapons, it will never be enough in Trump's view. At 2 a.m. today, Trump announced the decision of the United States to withdraw from Iran's nuclear agreement despite world opposition and dissuasion from allies. In his statement announcing the decision, Trump said that the framework of Iran's nuclear agreement was not enough to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, so he decided to abolish the LI agreement and impose a new round of fierce sanctions on Iran. He even threatened that any country that dares to help Iran acquire nuclear weapons will be subject to severe sanctions from the United States. At present, the leaders of Britain, France and Germany have jointly issued a statement expressing regret and concern over Trump's decision. In their reports, Western media such as Reuters described Trump's decision as a result of new unrest in the Middle East, discontent among European allies and uncertainty in international crude oil supply. The latest statement from Iran is that they will continue to negotiate with the 3 European countries, as well as China and Russia, in an effort to salvage the agreement. But if the agreement cannot be maintained and Iran can't taste the sweet spot, then Iran will restart nuclear weapons research. In addition, the foreign minister of Iran also took out the 3 European countries, and feel that they are very useless and have been so tricked by Trump. CNN also stressed in a report that it is not the first time Trump has publicly betrayed and provoked European allies, from withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement to threatening tariff sanctions.